when the attack happened on Tuesday in Qatar, my initial gut feeling was that this was an attack on Trump. And my first question is who benefits from this? And it's not Trump. As much as people like to hate Trump, this was potentially a fatal blow to Trump's credibility, because this was not the first time he fell into this trap. In July, Trump administration was negotiating with the Iranians, and then the Israelis attacked Iranian negotiators and killed a bunch of them. So this was the second time he fell into the exact same trap.
This is one of those moments where you just stop and ask, how many times does a leader have to get burned before they start learning from the pattern? This isn't just bad luck. It points to a deeper structural problem. If the same trap is being sprung twice, in similar ways, it suggests there are forces inside or around the administration that either can't be controlled, or worse, aren't even being looked for. And that has real implications for U.S. credibility on the world stage. Once others see a negotiating partner as vulnerable or easily manipulated, trust evaporates quickly.
Anyway, as I was wondering about that, then came out the news that there was a British Royal Air Force surveillance aircraft that was circling Doha for hours at the time when the attacks happened. And then we also saw that Trump was very embarrassed. He was saying, "I'm not very happy about this," and then he called the Qataris, and he made a statement about what he said. Maybe that is what he said to them, but basically the gist of it was that this will never happen again, and that they will sign a new military cooperation agreement with Qatar.
This is classic political damage control. But the problem is, no agreement can patch credibility if allies believe you can't protect them during negotiations. Words are one thing, but actions are what rebuild trust.
And then almost immediately after that, Netanyahu comes out and he says, "No, we will do this again." So they exactly contradict Trump in this sense and challenge him, undermining his credibility. So there's that's a huge problem. But for some reason, the role of the British is never scrutinized.
That's such an important point. We often focus entirely on the US or Israel in these events, but the UK still plays a very active role in intelligence gathering and shaping outcomes in the region. Historically, Britain's fingerprints are all over Middle Eastern borders, alliances, and conflicts. Maybe it's time we start asking harder questions about their current day influence, too.
I don't understand why Trump and his people try to own this and to say that, oh yeah, well, actually, it was Netanyahu who said that the Americans gave a green light to the attack. And then Trump said, like, well, we informed Qatari ahead of the time. But as it turned out, they informed the Qataris 10 minutes after the attack had already happened, which means that they didn't know either. They were taken by surprise, meaning they got ambushed by, I presume, by the Israelis and the British.
If this was an ambush, that's not just a diplomatic embarrassment, it's a strategic humiliation. You can't negotiate peace if your adversaries know your every move and time their strikes accordingly. That sets a dangerous precedent for future talks.
I think that this is now the culminating moment of the maybe it's an inflection point, not the culminating moment of the transition from the British model of security or insecurity on the Eurasian landmass, which has always been shaped in the function of divide and rule. So you always pit neighbor against neighbor, and you arm them both, and you give them loan to the both, and you always make sure that when one is a bit more powerful than the other, you support the other to, or, it's called the balance of power approach, right? And this has resulted in over a century of war on the Eurasian continent. And what the Russians and the Chinese are trying to do is they want to reset this security architecture, so to have a century of peace, or permanent peace on the continent. And Israel was created on the in the Levant, in Palestinian territories, exactly for the purpose of keeping the region constantly destabilized, constantly on the verge of war or at war. Just in the last 72 hours, Israel attacked six of the countries in the region.
This is where the double standard really hits home. 6 countries attacked in 3 days, and barely a whisper from Western media or governments. But one drone crosses a border in Europe and the world talks about global war. That kind of selective outrage is why trust in the international system is collapsing.
Six in 72 hours. Nobody bats an eyelid. A few drones fly from Russia or from Ukraine over into Polish airspace, and people's heads explode. This is like an unforgivable affront. The barbaric Russians, look what they're doing. Israel bombs six of its neighbors in 3 days, and everybody thinks that that's just normal because Israel has the right to defend itself, and they can do whatever they want. They can kill other people's negotiating teams, their governments, their prime minister and the whole cabinet. In Yemen, they can bomb Iran's embassy in Syria. They can do whatever they want, and nobody cares. And so, an impartial analysis of these things already in 2012 in the United States, in cooperation of all 17, I think it was 16 at the time, all 16 intelligence agencies of the United States, came to the conclusion that the existence of Israel is antithetical to US interests in that region.
This was a striking moment back in 2012, when all U.S. intelligence agencies reportedly came to that conclusion. It shows that even within Washington, there's awareness that the current approach may be undermining America's own security and diplomatic goals.
And so now this is becoming obvious, and unfortunately, there's a lot of myth, there's a lot of entrenched thinking where everybody thinks that the United States is subservient to Israel. That's not the case. That Donald Trump is somehow devoted to Benjamin Netanyahu, and that he will do whatever Benjamin Netanyahu says. I don't think that's the truth either. But I think that we're coming to the point where um, things as they are now are unsustainable, and it's becoming obvious even to the public in the West, in the United States, and in the Western Europe, and it's becoming very, very obvious to all the regional powers. And so now, given that the United States can't really act against Israel,
This is the political bind. Washington can't openly confront Israel without paying a huge domestic price, but that leaves U.S. strategy hostage to actions it doesn't fully control, and that is unsustainable long term.
because as we saw, the U.S. Congress is practically owned by Israel. If Benjamin Netanyahu comes to the American Congress today, after 3 years of genocide, and gives a speech, the all the congressmen and women, like clapping seals, will give him 50 standing ovations. And half the offices, who knows, maybe more, of congressmen in U.S. Capitol, they have Israeli flags there, and plagues saying, we stand with Israel, we support Israel, etc., etc. So you can't, politically, you can't challenge Israel head on, but I think that the realignment is already taking place, and we just had Days ago we had SEO summit in Shanghai, in China, and the uh, the world is realizing that this is the security architecture that they have today is a way for them to be permanently at war, to be targeted at any time of day and night by the Israelis and their Western supporters. And so they have to, A, they have to make nice with their own people in their countries, and B, they have to talk to the Chinese and the Russians and to the Iranians, because Iran is now the new cornerstone of the future security architecture for that region.
That's a major shift. 10 years ago, Iran was treated as a pariah. Now it's a key piece of the emerging security puzzle. This is a sign of just how much the balance of power is changing in the Middle East. And that might be the real takeaway here. We're watching the old order crumble in slow motion. US dominance, British intelligence games, Israel's impunity, these are being challenged not just militarily but diplomatically by a coalition of states that no longer want to live under constant threat. It's messy, it's dangerous, but it could also be the start of something new. The question is whether Washington will adapt or double down on a playbook that no longer works.